are very different than rural areas. It takes a lot of planning to turn an open field into a thriving metropolitan area. So where do property owners fit into this planning process? Americans have a right to private property. This guy doesn't want intruders on his land, and it's his right to post it. But why would Richard Gross, a rural resident, have to get permission from the city of Grand Forks to make simple improvements to his property?
If I want to put an addition on my chicken coop, I have to get permission from the city.
How is a city able to do this? Because of a state law that gives cities authority to control land beyond their limits. The city of Bismarck has zoning authority over the land behind me. Why on earth would a city want zoning authority over land this far away from anything?
And they took it, in my opinion, they took that extra 2 miles because they could.
But if this is only happening in a small area of our state and only a few people are affected, why should anyone care?
They're coming your way. It's just a matter of constantly gobbling up.
You might be surprised, even shocked, at what is happening to landowners across North Dakota. Hi, I'm Jacqueline Dotsenrad with this NDPC special report. Government does a lot of planning. There's transportation planning, emergency planning, comprehensive planning, and a whole host of others. All levels of government plan for things. Cities, counties, and townships also zone land. They zone for residential, commercial, and industrial areas. But is all of this planning needed? Former planner and current Bismarck City Administrator Bill Woken says that planning is needed to anticipate what's going to happen tomorrow.
Why do you do planning? Is try to anticipate what's going to happen tomorrow, today, so that we can avoid making mistakes, can add some predictability to the environment, some stability, give people the opportunity to see, well, tomorrow what's going to be here, so that they know what they can do today and not have to undo it and redo it tomorrow.
Woken worries that without proper planning, the roads and sewer systems might end up in a real mess.
So that the roads, the water, the sewer, all of the utilities and infrastructure are continuous. If not, we can make some really difficult decisions tomorrow. We build a road that leads to a swamp, for example.
Cass County engineer Keith Berndt believes that planning is necessary as well.
It's necessary to plan a long ways in advance, and if a person doesn't do that, for instance, if private homes or businesses are built and at some point in the future a transportation corridor needs to go there, and those properties have to be purchased and demolished at taxpayer expense before the end of their life, that's the type of thing that can be avoided with good planning. But I think some level of planning has to be done out into what we call build out. For instance, around the Fargo area, we look at areas, if we're doing planning in the county and it's an area around the metro area, we say, okay, this area, we don't know exactly when it's going to be developed. It might be 20 years, it might be 40 years, depending on the growth rate, and that could change. It's influenced by the economy. But we say, okay, in this area, someday where everybody agrees that there's going to be development. And then we say, what should it ultimately look like? So we plan it for that ultimate build out. And if that's done, it doesn't matter so much whether that build out occurs in 10 years, 20 years, or 40 years, because everybody is aware of what the long-term plan is. And that helps the property owners, because property owners, I believe, have a right.
We do most things without government planning. Crowds of people do things like walk through malls without anyone telling them where to go. Economists call this spontaneous order. Groups of individuals in places will appear to be organized centrally, but in fact are only acting in their own self-interest. NDPC Economic Policy Fellow Brent Barch explains.
Spontaneous order, it's also known as like unplanned order, or referred to as emergent order. And it's a term used to describe the emergence of order from seeming chaos.
In other words, imagine a flock of birds flying through the air. They're flying in unison without any one bird directing them.
There's a notable absence of anyone centrally planning or directing the process.
So there is a real debate to be had about whether any of this planning is needed at all. But let us accept the argument that some kind of planning is needed. How much does this planning cost in terms of our property rights? One of the planning tools cities use is extraterritorial zoning. Extraterritorial zoning, or ET zoning, gives cities the power to zone and regulate land outside of its limits. When the law passed in the 70s, the cities were able to zone anywhere from 1 to 2 miles outside of its limits, depending on population. North Dakota Representative Lee Kaldor is chairman of the Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations, which studied ET zoning throughout 2008.
Originally, the idea behind ET zoning was not only is it orderly planning for growth, but it's also cost-effective planning for growth.
So was the land outside of cities not zoned before ET zoning came along? According to attorney Jonathan Garris, townships have that authority.
We also have North Dakota Century Code 580311. Townships have the right to establish uniform zoning districts, and that's to protect property.
Garris told us that this type of governing has been going on for quite some time.
They are going to operate as an organized form of township government, which is the lowest form but the most democratic form of government in North Dakota. It's recognized because there are neighbors within 36 square miles that are dealing with other neighbors' problems. And they will have the right to tax, and they will have the right to spend, and they have the right to protect and preserve that access rights, travel rights, and they will do their jobs. The township have been doing that since probably statehood. I think it probably go back to territorial days.
So if townships already have zoning authority in unincorporated areas, then why do cities need to zone outside their limits?
The limits of their governing power or their authority. For example, laying out and planning a street or an artery of transportation that's going to come into a city. When they see that growth is taking place in a certain direction, they want to make sure that the county or township roads that are leading up to that main artery into the city are all coordinated. So you need to have setbacks for housing or development. You need to have some, they're concerned about health and public safety issues. They're concerned about infrastructure like electric power delivery, water and sewer potentially delivered to those areas in the future. So zoning is the vehicle by which they exercise that control, that growth management.
But how much area does a city need? Here is a map of Grand Forks. The city itself is 20 square miles, while the extraterritorial area is 78. Does a city need to zone an area that is nearly 4 times as big as the city itself? Think of it in another way. It took Grand Forks almost 140 years to take up 20 square miles. Using that same growth rate, it would take Grand Forks another 560 years to get to the end of the 4-mile extraterritorial area. If it will take a city like Grand Forks 560 years to reach the 4-mile boundary, why would the city want to deal with the headache of zoning that much land?
They require a hookup that is both to your sewer, because you're still out in the country, you don't have city sewer, but they want you to put a hookup in already for the city. Now, I've heard statistics that it'll take as much as 100 years before the city is out in the 4-mile. So you install a city sewer hookup, and you might not need it for 100 years. It probably is obsolete by that time and rotten by that time. It adds unnecessary costs.
We charted that growth. It showed that the area that Grand Forks took, they would not occupy for over 100 years. And that's where we had a lot of concern about what's reasonable, because they in effect suspended anybody's rights in that whole area until the city decided what to do when they got there. And to suspend someone's rights for an idea that you may need a street here in 100 years just seemed to us to be an abuse of power.